This is Kenya Andrews, and this is my In the Field media presentation on conflict management. This afternoon, my interviewee is Bishop David Scoggins, the senior pastor of the Killeen-Abundant Life Church of God. Bishop Scoggins serves in the unique position of being in the community where the largest military installation is located in the United States, Fort Hood, Texas. Thank you, Bishop Scoggins, for giving me your time.
Appreciate it. Honored to do it.
So, my first question is, what do you believe is the source of most human conflict?
Lack of communication. People not being able to listen and communicate with one another, and having the ability to sit down calmly and communicate.
What do you think is the most important element in handling conflict?
Becoming an extremely good listener. If you can learn to listen to people, most of the time folks just want to be heard. And if you can learn to listen to people and passionately let them see your body language, I truly believe it's the best element in handling a conflict.
So, serving outside of Fort Hood, you've probably had your fair share of hearing about conflict. What is conflict to you?
In short, it's misunderstanding that has become escalated. It's two or more individuals that have a thought or an idea or a process, and I'm not here trying to give you like a Webster's dictionary definition, but the fact of the matter is that it most of the time comes from a misunderstanding or not getting all of the facts before acting in a certain situation.
How important is it to get all of the facts?
It's very important to always gather all of the information that you possibly can. As a leader, as a pastor, I find it not only necessary, but it becomes most apropos for both those that are involved in the conflict and you that's trying to mediate the conflict, because gathering the information, or as we would say on Fort Hood, gathering the intel, is of the utmost importance.
Awesome. Do you believe there is a difference in the way leaders manage conflict compared to the way managers and followers manage conflict?
In so many different ways, I really think that leaders and managers mirror one another in the way that they would handle conflict, in the aspect of they're in a position to lead and to direct anyone that is under their direction or under their following, as it were. Whereas followers, they have to be those that are able to not only communicate what their needs are to get the task done, but then they've also got to be willing to accept direction. And sometimes the conflict comes in that when either the leader is not effective in their communication and direction, or the follower only hears part of the task at hand. So I think there's definitely differences there, because a leader's and manager's expectations in a position is to make sure that they are clearly defining the task. Otherwise, you're faced with conflict, because then there's confusion that comes about and sets in. So the short answer is yes, and that's the detailed answer.
Awesome. I have another question then. How would you characterize your conflict management style? Is it authoritarian, democratic, or laissez-faire?
I'm not very laissez-faire. I'm not very hands-off. I'm pretty hands-on, but that being said, I do act on the authoritative situation as well as democratic. Let me explain. I always do my best in a church of our size and in my management style, so to speak. I've always been one of those that if I have a staff person or a team leader that's handling an area, I try to let them handle whatever the situation is. If it's a conflict, I let them try to diffuse it, let them work it out amongst those that are on their team and figure out what the best way to handle that, and then report back to me and let me know what the situation was. If there's something that I need to get involved in, it needs to come to my office, well, that's where the authoritative side of me comes in. I'm not so democratic in that particular regard, because then I'm going to listen to my leader. And in most cases, I'm probably going to follow with whatever his or her plan was, because they're actually fulfilling the vision that God gave me for the church in their area. So in doing so, I'm going to make sure that I do my best to let them, my staff, diffuse whatever the situation is. But if it needs to come to me, then I understand that the buck stops here. So in a nutshell, I don't have any issues whatsoever sitting down with individuals. So to describe me, I'm both authoritative and democratic. To say I'm hands off, I don't think that would be the case, because I always like to have a little report back to let me know how the status of things going, because I want to diffuse a situation before it ever accelerates.
That is an interesting thing. In our studies, we're learning that sometimes God, through the Holy Spirit, gives a different type of administrative perspective to leaders. With that in mind, who have been your influential models for you in terms of conflict management?
I have a spiritual father, Brother Daryl Mauser, retired minister, well over 35 plus years of pastoring, that speaks into my life on a consistent basis. And I'm very, very guarded about how many people or who it is that speaks into my life. But I've been able to draw strength from his wisdom. Other pastors that I know that have been successful, churches of our size and larger, and while we were growing, I was growing with that process of speaking with them and getting their information and letting that kind of cultivate in my spirit, as well as people don't see church as a business. And church is a business. We have finances that we have to balance. We have conflicts that we have to contend with. We have people that we have to manage and employ. All of those things happen just like it does with any other business. So I also employ the counsel of wise businessmen that have helped me over the years to be able to influence me in such a way that I can put budgets together. I used to be known as the pastor that could operate state-of-the-art, cutting-edge ministry on a shoestring budget, just because I would find whatever it was, not that I was always looking for the free situation, but I would find the most frugal way to accommodate and to get the task at hand handled. And so in a nutshell, I've had a lot of businessmen, pastors, as well as my spiritual father that's in my life, even consistently today, that have been very influential in helping me to develop the style and the way that I manage and take care of and pastor a church.
That is an awesome thing to behold. So, am I hearing you say that there are those who have helped you to develop your conflict management skills? If they have, how did they do that?
They've spoken to my life. They've given me their time. I've shared scenarios with them, and they've helped me in similar situations that they have been involved with. Churches of our size, smaller and larger, circumstances that they dealt with. Most cases would be 20 plus year veterans in my area or in my field, which is pastoring, obviously. And, you know, even though I had mentors, I also learned a lot by a little thing called trial and error. I'm not going to say I've been a perfect pastor all of my life. I mean, when I first started pastoring, I would consider myself, like Deadliest Catch would say, I was a greenhorn. So, you know, there was probably a whole lot of apology that I needed to make to my very first church. But the fact of the matter is that as I've grown, you know, March of 2015 is 15 years of being a senior pastor for me. And a lot of people don't know that, but I've been senior pastor for 15 years. I've served as a district overseer in my current capacity as well as a previous capacity for a total combined of 5 years of that 15 years. And in my time, I've had to sit down and deal with congregations. I've had to sit down and talk with people, all this. And so a lot of it has been a lot of trial and error, as well as good, strong mentors that have helped me with scenarios when I've shared them with them, or things that they have built that says this is what you need to be prepared for.
So with that in mind then, what do you think is the most difficult aspect of conflict management as a leader?
Acting too hasty. Drawing a conclusion about a situation without having the complete knowledge of what exactly is going on. Making too hasty of a decision based upon your first look at the conflict.
Please explain a little further.
Well, if somebody was to walk into my office and tell me that they had a challenge with one of my staff people, and I was to immediately side with them and say, oh, I understand that person does those kinds of things all the time, then it would become a situation to where now I've acted hasty. I've not employed the information from my staff person. I've taken one person's word as the gospel, and I've not gathered, as it were, my terminology is the intel necessary to make a good informed decision. In short, I've acted way too hasty. The fact of how to handle that is to gather that person's information, my leader's information. If need be, sit them both down and talk with them at the same time. Let one talk with the other one, with me being the mediator, and in the process drawing to the conclusion that would bring a resolve that all parties would be happy with.
One of the things that I hear you consistently saying is communication.
Absolutely. It's the key.
How would you answer or respond, especially as we are talking about believers, someone who handles a conflict and says, just pray about it?
Faith without works is dead. So if I'm going to pray, I need to pray specifically. Furthermore, some people use you just need to pray about it as a way to kick the can down the road, or to pass the buck, or to tell that individual your needs are not really important. What your situation is not of the essence. When in fact, again, 90% of people just want to be heard. And if you're willing to listen and not cut them off and say, pray about it, not that we don't need to pray, but I think we need to pray specifically and not give somebody the idea or the understanding that what they're saying isn't really significant. Because the fact of the matter is that if they brought it to your attention, it's significant to them.
I'm going to ask you one more question that is not on the list, but it is this. What do you believe is the end purpose of conflict management?
All parties need to be on the same page in order to achieve a result that is positive. All parties. That means everybody is in agreement that this is the resolve that we have come to.
Great. So then, how have you prepared to manage conflict in a global, multicultural environment? Because to be here at Fort Hood definitely means it is global and it is multicultural.
It is. Our church vision to connect Christ with our community and all around the world. As a military area, multi-diverse cultural church, we find ourselves in a very diverse cultural environment. And so the very first thing that I had to do when I got to Fort Hood was, and you've heard me say this over and over in our conversation today, I had to become an extremely good listener. Because what one type of cultural group may act on in a particular situation, another one may act extremely different. On the other hand, we have people in our church that they are married, but they're of different backgrounds and different cultures. So now one's trying to understand the other one, and conflict is happening in their marriage because one wants to handle things this way and one wants to handle it the other way, when in fact neither one of them are wrong. Neither situation is sin, but the fact of the matter is they can't seem to get on the same page. So what's my job? My job is to sit them down, which I have done with everything else that I've done and said already today, and I follow the same rules and same steps that I've explained to my staff, that I've explained to my team leaders, and I follow the same rule. There is a thing called four parts love and 4 parts love and 1 part correction. And so before I give them any direction, before I correct anything on either one of those parties, because I need to listen to the whole situation and not immediately draw my conclusion, then I sit down and I say, well, I ask questions. What about if you considered this? And then I'll look to the other party and say, and have you thought about that? And then we begin to pull that together, and what happens is this culture on this side and this culture on this side, even though they live in the same house, they finally realize that they can develop their own plan of action. I call it Plan A for their household. If it's a staff person and it's their team, that staff person knows my heart, understands the vision of the church. They can find their own plan of action for themselves and with their team and pull it together and make it work. That we've just got to be extremely good listeners, because sometimes people are saying the right things, but the way they're presenting it or they're communicating it is not effectively communicating to the other party. And sometimes it's a cultural situation because of the way it's described. So if you listen and you really pick out the things that are necessary to pull that together, then everybody can walk away with a Plan A.
Awesome. My last question is this. What arbitrary steps does your organization itself employ for resolution?
We have a team leader or a staff person that's over every area. We all use the 4 parts love, 1 part correction as our process to achieve a very positive outcome in every situation. Sometimes conflicts are not bad things, because so many people, they want to put conflicts in the bad category. Sometimes conflicts are nothing more than growing pains, and it gives them the opportunity to be able to grow from a situation. Perhaps somebody's never been this way before. They've never went this far before. They've never been in a church of this size. They've never had to manage this many people before. Their team is no longer 3 or 4. It's now 20 or 30, and they're going, oh, Pastor, I'm not exactly sure what I'm supposed to. It's a growing pain. It's a conflict for them, because they're at war within themselves. How on earth can I manage this? But then they learn the process of delegation, and they begin to delegate things out. How are they going to be able to do that? There's no way they can do that unless they have a relationship with those that they are leading.
In closing, my final thought and question is this. As a manager, as a conflict manager, as a leader, how important is it to you that those you lead understand you?
I want them to walk in and walk out of my office completely and totally understanding where I'm coming from, and I want to understand where they're coming from. Folks are really looking for somebody that cares. They want somebody that'll stop and listen. And they want somebody that will address their need. And I think that communication, knowing it's a two-way street, somebody's talking and somebody's listening, then I think it's imperative that both of us, before we get up from the room and dismiss ourselves from one another's company, that we truly and completely, effectively understand one another. Otherwise, we'll be right back in the same room facing the same situation over again, because once again, we'll face conflict.
Thank you so much. This is Kenya Andrews signing off for In the Field Media Conflict Management with Senior Pastor Bishop David Scoggins of the Killeen-Abundant Life Church of God. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Kenya.